Okay, so that was your official announcement that we are recording. Welcome again. I'm Karen Bentrup. This is Progressive Democrats of America, the Central New Mexico chapter, and we're so pleased that all of you can be here with us from across the United States and joining our honored guest speaker, Dennis Kucinich. We have a few things to do ahead of Dennis's talk, and we have lots of time for Dennis to both speak and read from his current book and also do discussion and Q&A with us. So it's going to be a rich and full evening for everyone. So first, I just want to do a couple pieces here that may help orient you. Right now in the chat, Tech is going to drop in the link to the agenda. So if you like following along with a written agenda, our PDA CNM website has a link. So if you like to have that up on your screen or available, that's dropping in.
Too many eyes and the cranes are already awake.
Okay. So it's real helpful if you can keep yourself muted. Thank you for that. That's one of the tech tips. So dropping into the chat will be the link to the agenda, and you can follow along with that.
It may not seem like the most romantic setting, huddled together with a few hundred of your close relatives. But make no mistake.
I'm not sure if that's a GOP intrusion or just a tech.
Close call to each other.
Okay, so if I'm just going to ask everyone to check that they're muted.
Some have been together.
I'm going to go ahead and mute all and then unmute you.
Thank you. All right, thanks friends for that little technical burp. So dropping into the chat is the link for the agenda, and you'll see it right now. It says pdacnm.files. So if you want to follow along with the agenda, it's there. We're also going to drop into the chat the National PDA website. It's a terrific place to sign up for news, links, and actions. So we invite all of you to be active at the national level with PDA and receive their terrific information and action alerts. We also want to thank this evening Lisa Franzen, our state director. She'll be on speaking a little bit later. And we're very pleased that Herb Hoffman, one of the long-term members of PDA CNM, was able to invite Mr. Kucinich this evening for us. So thank you, Herb, and thank you, Lisa, and all the other members of the planning team here at PDA CNM. We really appreciate that. So Lloyd, when you're ready, we're going to do a couple tech tips from our IT folks. And you'll hear Lloyd's voice while you look at my face, being interested.
So hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. So some tech tips for Zoom etiquette is to please keep yourself muted when you're not speaking. And if at the end of this meeting, you decide there's a lot of important information in the chat window and you want to save it, if you open the chat window, there's 3 dots or ellipses, and if you click on those 3 dots, it'll give you an option to save the contents of the chat window to a file on your device. So thank you, and a reminder is we are being recorded, so if you don't want your face to appear at any point on the recording, you can stop your video. So back to you, Karen.
Great, thanks so much, Lloyd. And I'm just going to offer, if you would keep looking at the participant list, a couple people are unmuted. So if you would just mute them directly, that would be great. And the other thing we want to invite you is that we often do questions, particularly when we have a larger group, and we're so glad you can all be here. We do questions in the chat. So if you have a question for Dennis, all right, so momentarily muted. For questions, we have a team that's going to sweep all your questions out of the chat. What really helps them is if you put a question mark in the chat, start with a question mark, then we know it's a question, and type your question. And our question team will scoop that out, and Lisa, the moderator, will manage that part of the discussion as part of Dennis's overall presentation. So in addition to that, PDA CNM often does a land acknowledgement when we gather in groups. And this evening, we're kind of shifting that land acknowledgement to invite folks to remember this month on November 25th, there is a gathering that is often called Thanksgiving, which for many thousands of people is not a time of Thanksgiving. And we might be considering calling it a harvest gathering. You might call it a truthsgiving. For many people, it is a day of mourning. So we're dropping into the chat now a link from the National Museum of the American Indian, part of the whole Smithsonian Collective. And there is terrific information that is all age appropriate in that link that we dropped. And it's really helpful, maybe as progressives, as PDA folk, that we learn more and then share that with our families, that we can really move towards a truthsgiving and a real harvest gathering. In the spirit of giving thanks here in New Mexico, in Albuquerque, we invite you to support the Tiny Home Village, which is long-term transitional housing for people who have been unsheltered. And their first benefit is coming up this month, and that is getting dropped into the chat. So my fellow Burkanians, we need you. So folks in Burkland, we need you to come out and support the Tiny Home Village. All right, I think that's our welcome and our tech tips and our land acknowledgement, landing here in our space. And again, here in New Mexico, we are in unceded Tiwa territory. And we welcome everyone who has joined our meeting this evening and our community gathering. And we're ready, Herb, for you. So when you're ready, Herb, you can unmute yourself and invite Dennis.
It is my honor as a member of the Central New Mexico chapter of PDA to introduce this evening's speaker. But first, a short history lesson. It was during the 2004 National Democratic Convention in Boston that the Kucinich presidential campaign gave impetus to establishing a progressive voice in the Democratic Party that would work both inside and outside the party. Thus, the founding of Progressive Democrats of America. Since that founding, it has often not been smooth sailing, especially for Dennis Kucinich. He has for years been targeted by the Democratic establishment in its efforts to exclude the progressive voice and ideas. For example, the party imported a primary challenger with party funding at one time. The efforts to mute expression of progressive views on the presidential debate platforms, and ultimately the Democratic gerrymandering of his district, which resulted in his defeat after serving 8 terms in Congress. What are some of the ideas and positions that the party found to be so objectionable? And they still do, I think. Dennis introduced legislation over the years to establish a Department of Peace, which is closer to fruition now with Barbara Lee's HR 1111, a bill to establish a Department of Peace building. He has been a leader in the Medicare for All movement. He introduced on the floor of the House, by privileged resolution, 37 articles in support of the impeachment of Presidents George W. Bush. I have known of Dennis ever since I saw his picture on the cover of Life magazine, the boy mayor of Cleveland. I ran as a Kucinich delegate to the 2004 state convention in Maine. However, it wasn't until the 2008 presidential campaign that we first met in January of 2008 in Portland, Maine. I am not embarrassed to acknowledge I became a Kucinich groupie at that moment. Ultimately, after many requests, I was asked to join the campaign as a member of his senior staff. An example of how persistence can pay off. Those were very heady times working with people like our beloved and late Steve Cobble and John Nichols. Most importantly was working for Dennis Kucinich. I would like to share a special time with Dennis and Elizabeth. And Dennis, Elizabeth is welcome to pop in at any moment.
Elizabeth, you've been invited.
It was following a Kucinich rally in Wells, Maine. Though late, I was able to convince the owners of a Chinese restaurant to stay open. We were joined by 3 colleagues in this entirely empty restaurant. While we munched on Chinese cuisine, Dennis and Elizabeth shared how they met and some details about their courtship. It was a very special and intimate moment. Another example of how Dennis's persistence leads to success. Dennis is a gifted and dynamic orator. His book, Light and Power, reveals his literary skills. Most importantly, it details Dennis Kucinich as a man of unwavering principle, a quality which, unfortunately, is in very short supply these days. I give you my boss, Dennis J. Kucinich.
Wow, Herb. Herb Hoffman. Wow, thank you so much. It's very humbling to hear everything that you said, and I'm so grateful for your friendship and for the role that you played in arranging this. And while it was said a few moments ago that a stipulation for this meeting is that we try to get at least 50 people, the rest of it was either 50 people or just Herb Hoffman. Either one would have been okay. But I'm so grateful to you, Herb, for your friendship, for your recounting of the time that we've spent together and the many times we spent together, both in Maine and other places, and for the role that you played in campaigns. And by association, for everyone on this call, Alan Minsky, I see that you're in here. Thank you for your leadership of PDA. Mike Fox, thank you for keeping us all informed of what's going on. The Central New Mexico group, which with Herb's initiative is sponsoring this, thank you. Elizabeth and I have, pre-COVID, traveled to New Mexico many, many times with friends in both Albuquerque, Bernalillo County, as well as Santa Fe and Santa Fe County. We've always felt very close to New Mexico, to the land, to the connection with the sacred places, the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. There's something about the purity of the connection with the land there, the energy that's still there from our native brothers and ancestors, and something very special about New Mexico. And I want to say how grateful I am for this opportunity to have this discussion about the book that I've written, The Division of Light and Power. It was first published this summer, and it has been a work of labor, a work of love. I actually, the book that I present tonight, The Division of Light and Power, this was the 7th draft. And I started writing in 1979. And then when I got to Congress, I just, I didn't have time to write a book because I was trying to write a better history for the United States. In any event, when I left Congress in 2013, with Elizabeth's support, I focused on writing it. Still wasn't sure of the draft, but by the summer of May, and by May of 2018, I went nonstop to finish it at the beginning of this year, and finally got it to, printed, published, and here we are. The book itself is a series of small chapters, vignettes you could call. Herb said earlier, it reads like a novel, but everything in it is thoroughly documented. And it really gives, my intention in writing this book was not just to tell old history. It said to pass as prologue. Let me tell you, what's in this book today is reflective of a political process across the country and in many places around the world, about the potential of politics, the venality of it, what happens when people win, what happens when we don't. It's about life. It's about the human condition. And each chapter, I put a lot of time and effort and love into every line to try to make sure that the reader was not only respected, but given an opportunity to be well informed about the events from years ago and how they reflect on the present day. What I want to do with your help is this. I'm going to read a few passages and a chapter from the book, maybe two, and then we'll get into a discussion. Because I'm not very good at keeping time on these things, I said earlier that it always, in Congress, it was helpful because a gavel would come down after 1 minute. The gentleman's time has expired. But in this case, I'll need some help so that when I'm at 25 minutes, I'd like to be notified so that we can then switch to Q&A and because I want your participation. These events that I describe in the book. In some ways, they're commonplace. In other ways, what happened in Cleveland back then was unprecedented in American history for reasons you'll find out when you get into it. The final thing I want to say before I begin is that if you don't already have it in the chat, or if you're not in the chat, you can go to Finney Avenue Books, Finney, FinneyAvenueBooks.com, and that'll give you various means of being able to get the Division of Light and Power. It's been called a cross between The Godfather and Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. It's been compared to Chinatown. I hope that if you read it, you'll find that it lives up to those expectations. And right now, I'm going to begin some introductory pieces to kind of give you a flavor of what the book is about. And I'm going to start with a quote from the individual who founded Muni Light in Cleveland at the turn of the 20th century. His name was Tom L. Johnson. He was described by the great American investigative reporter and muckraking journalist Lincoln Steffens as being the best mayor of the best governed city in America. And it was Tom Johnson who was the one who founded Cleveland's municipal electric system, but it came from a philosophy. He was a disciple of Henry George, for those of you who are interested in the economic aspects of the story. But here's what Tom Johnson said. He said, "I believe in public ownership of all public service monopolies for the same reason that I believe in the municipal ownership of waterworks, of parks, of schools. I believe in the municipal ownership of these monopolies because if you do not own them, they will in time own you. They will corrupt your politics, rule your institutions, and finally, destroy your liberties." I have a prologue to this book I'm going to read to you because I think it's instructive for everyone who's obviously interested in government. People who say you can't fight City Hall don't know where City Hall is. You have to find it before you can fight City Hall. City Hall was not only the Doric gray stone temple on East 6th and Lakeside Avenue in downtown Cleveland. City Hall is the boardroom of Cleveland's banks. It's investor-owned utilities, it's real estate combines, and the mob. In Cleveland, City Hall was in the shadows, a giant specter, invisible to the people of the city. I brought the invisible City Hall to light with great consequences for my city, my family, my friends, and myself. I was the mayor, and I fought City Hall. Dennis Kucinich, mayor of Cleveland, 1977 to 1979. Slight introduction. Government works. The question is, who's it working for? Part one, City in the Dark. And here's the first chapter. Chapter 1, Christmas Blackout. Jesus loves you. The words swirled in the crisp air of the glistening snow globe known as Cleveland, Ohio. If in these wintry mists it was redemption you sought, you found it in the ministry of the streets with Reverend Doris Price, a living, breathing, holy card version of Jesus Christ with dark olive skin, reddish beard, piercing blue eyes, and a baritone voice which rose above the surging Christmas holiday crowd. He called out randomly to weary shoppers. Their interest was not salvation, but consumption, the search for tokens of affection. They were preoccupied with the dazzling holiday lights, distracted by the elegant display windows of the May Company, and entranced by the angelic carolers singing above the recorded music coming from the department stores. Undaunted, the Reverend Price looked upwards, a pale yellow streetlight casting a touch of glory upon his face. He extended his arms towards the heavens in exultation. Jesus loves you. Jesus loves you, Mary. Joyously, he flung a morsel of grace into the snowy sky. It descended gently and touched a child of God named Mary, whose backward-looking gaze was caught by the all-seeing eye of Reverend Price, a divine gotcha moment at his corner tabernacle on Euclid Avenue at Ontario Street. Mary, give your life to Jesus. Striking his name with a vocal thunderbolt, Mary was transfixed, her eyes on God's messenger. She received Reverend Price's nod as a beatitude, then smiled and turned to catch the crowd hurrying across Ontario Street in a headlong rush to prepare for Christmas, 1969. The Reverend Price, animated apostle of the abbreviated epistle, clapped his thick worn Bible and elevated it as a sacrament. Spirit shook his body. His eyes widened with joy as he called out to another soul, passionately dispensing deliverance to the procession of shoppers whose only interest was in waiting for the traffic light to change so they could worship at the altar of the god Xmas. Snow flurried. As my bride Helen and I hurried past the Bible-thumping Reverend Price and coursed with the crowd into Higbee's department store. Later, just moments after we exited with bags of gifts, a power failure hit downtown Cleveland and Christmas disappeared. Helen looked at me, surprised, and frowned. What's that? City's lights seem to be going out a lot, I observed. Maybe it's the weather, she offered. I don't know, Helen. We've been having blackouts no matter the weather. When the lights go out, what can you do? You wait for them to come back on. That's life in the big city, except I had just been elected to the Cleveland City Council, and I had every intention of showing that things were going to be different. I went to a payphone to call the city's light system, and after several attempts, got through. Division of Light and Power, a harried voice answered. This is Dennis Kucinich. I'm the new councilman from Ward 7. Could you please tell me why the lights are out? It's 4 days before Christmas and hold on. The man growled. You're that kid who beat Walensky. Yes, that was me at age 23, often mistaken for a paper boy. As I campaigned for a paper boy in his early teens, when I campaigned door to door. I defeated the Ukrainian Robin Hood, John Taras Walensky, on my second time around with the help of the Cleveland Police. Paul DeGrandis, the deputy director of the Cuyahoga County Board of Elections, and 6'6", 320-pound Scott Sikorsky. Scott was a campaign worker and a high school classmate who, after several failed attempts by election supervisors to get those inside a polling place in Ward 7 to open the door, tore it clean off the hinges. It was there an hour earlier in the basement of St. Augustine Church. Belinsky's ward machine, which officiated inside the polling station, ejected our designated witness, barricaded the windows and doors, and then silently, desperately, proceeded to count the paper ballots creatively until they could come up with enough votes for Belinsky to win. Once Scott opened the door, the police and county election officials rushed inside like it was an Elliott Ness raid of a bootleg joint. The ballots were impounded and taken by police car to a secure place at the Cuyahoga County Board of Elections. The official tally would take place at the election board, where I won by 16 votes in a recount. So that's how I became the councilman of a neighborhood where I went to high school, where church spires and pipe organ smokestacks reached to the smudged sky, a neighborhood populated by a steely league of nations who spoke Polish, Greek, Slovak, Ukrainian, Russian, Arabic, Spanish, and occasionally English. It was a neighborhood of narrow streets lined with old men wearing white shirts and suspenders, and old ladies wearing babushkas and carrying shopping bags that dangled just above their socks, parading up and down the small commercial district on Professor Avenue. It was on that very street in August of 1960, the St. John Kansas Jayhawks, hold on. On that very street in August of 1960, the St. John Kansas Jayhawks varsity football squad gathered on the school steps for team pictures. As a 13-year-old, 4'9", 98-pound, third string varsity quarterback, I was being prepared for a career in Cleveland politics with every blindside tackle, sack, forearm in the face, bell ringer, dirt-eating episode known as the game. As the last boy on the team, I practiced a gritty resilience against physical odds, a trait which would ultimately serve me well in the smash mouth ward politics of the Tremont area. I made the St. John Kansas varsity team as a freshman, despite the misgivings of coaches who, understanding the notion of contributory manslaughter, were alarmed at my lack of size. They humored my desire to enter into a single scrimmage, certain I'd be easily dismissed given my first assignment, which was to take out the biggest person on the squad with a crossbody block. Once I executed the play perfectly, I made the team, and play I did, lettering in my first year for 3 reasons. 1, the first string quarterback was injured. 2, the second string quarterback was injured. And 3, I was the only other person on the team who knew all the plays, so I took to the field when the regular quarterbacks were sidelined. My biggest challenge, I couldn't see over my center's rear end, but the other side couldn't see me either. I never recognized or even respected physical boundaries and odds, which was also good training for a career in politics. Once the ball was snapped, I was on my own, and I loved the contest, a quality I inherited from the home life of my youth. Don't try throwing any weight around here you don't have, kid. You're not a councilman for a couple of weeks. I keep track of those things. His phone rang continuously in the background. Now you got it straight. There's a power failure all over the city. Number 6 boiler's out. We're working on it. No steam for the turbine generators. Here's something for you. We don't have an emergency backup. No interconnect. So the whole system's down. CEI, the Cleveland Electric Illuminating Company, that's the private power company, is shafting us. They won't give us a backup. We're stuck with outages. I gotta go. Wait, when will the lights come back on? Look, kid, I'm a boiler operator, not a fortune teller. People are gonna have to wait. Bye. He hung up the phone. Little did I know how this exchange with a frantic boiler operator would impact the course of my life. I turned to Helen and said, how hard can it be to keep a light system going? Community lights always breaking down. People pay their electric bills. They have a right to expect the lights will come on when they flip the switch, I said. once you get on council, things will be different, right? Helen said in reassurance. Yes, I said. After all, I knew about utilities from the time I was a child because my parents had trouble paying the electric bills. I had an 11-year-old's memory of a 3-room upstairs apartment on St. Clair Avenue, where then 7 of us lived. Our suite had a cracked bathroom mirror, rusting tub, newspapers covering the windows, and red paint blistered bedroom floor, which held a stained, torn mattress on which my 2 brothers, Frank and Gary, and I slept. Under a dim yellow light, my parents counted pennies on a chipped white metal table, trying to set aside enough money to pay the electric bill. Click, click, click. The pennies dropped one by one. Click, click, click. From our cramped bedroom, I could hear the pennies dropping. Click, click, click. I could hear the pennies dropping in my sleep as they hit the metal table. So that'll give you some flavor of, you know, what it was like when I first got into politics. And then another vignette. You know, it seems like I was always destined to fight the Democratic machine because the Democratic Party ended up nominating somebody connected to the corporate community, you know, since we're talking 50 years ago, and I couldn't handle that. So it turned out the Republican candidate was really from the grassroots in Cleveland. And so I ended up supporting Ralph J. Perk. Okay, this was my introduction to citywide politics. As we opened Perk Democratic headquarters, I glanced out the broad windows of the Tremont storefront, looking out on Lincoln Park to see a tall, thin as a rail ebony man step from a long, dark Cadillac. He was immaculately clad in a pale green suit, white shirt, and a white tie. A diamond stick pin glinted from his lapel. He approached the door, opened it, lowered his head in a respectful manner, and inquired, "Mr. Kucinich?" His neatly trimmed mustache accented a close smile. "Yes, sir," I said. He was a man of such impeccability, I considered it inappropriate to correct his mispronunciation of my name. "I'm Bill Seawright. I'm here for RAF," he said, pronouncing candidate Perk's first name as though he was describing a buoyant, floating platform. "You running RAF's campaign?" "Yes, I'm organizing Democrats for Perk. May I help you?" "No," he said smartly. "There's nothing you can do for me. There is something I can do for you. I mean, RAF. Hold on, Mr. Kucinich. I'll be right back." As I watched, he returned to his Cadillac, opened the trunk, and tugged at a large battered suitcase, which, with additional effort, he dislodged, trundling it into our office. "I have important information here," he said, patting the suitcase. "RAF's going to need this, Mr. Kucinich," he said, slapping the suitcase again for emphasis. He glanced back to the door. Coast was clear. He motioned subtly with his chin toward the rear door, partitioned from the street view, where research papers were piled high on a lunch table. I was crafting the Perk platform here on an Olympia typewriter. I cleared a space. Thud. Seawright set down the suitcase. Its exterior was well traveled, its frame sturdy. He clicked open the locks and swiveled its contents for my full view, proudly announcing, "This is for RAF." My jaw dropped. The suitcase was jammed with thousands of dollars, hand-weathered 10s and 20s, stashed in large bundles. Legend had it that such suitcases fueled political campaigns, tilted political decisions, and upon discovery, occasionally sent someone to prison. The apocryphal became reality before my startled eyes. I sensed the danger. Seawright's smile was sickly, less congenial, and more like a greeting by the proprietor of a funeral home who was welcoming the only visitor of the day to a one-car political funeral. In this suitcase, mine, I instantly had the creeps. "Don't worry, it's real," Seawright said, as if counterfeiting was my concern. My God, I knew what money looked like. It's just that I'd never seen so much of it, and so much cash so close, offered for my control. "It's all for the campaign, Mr. Kucinich. Understand, I don't want anybody to know about this," he said with the emphasis of a man of well-practiced discretion. What had I gotten into by offering to help him run a mayor's campaign? Oh, Jesus, there are laws against this. I could become complicit in an under-the-table political transaction. My eyes lingered at the contents of the suitcase. My thoughts raced. Momentarily, Seawright and I were joined in the room by the spirit of Sister Leona, my sixth grade teacher and the principal of St. Aloysius Catholic Elementary School in Cleveland, Ohio, in 1958. She came to my awareness in full black and white habit, scribing upon the blackboard a short poem, "The Minute," which admonished her unruly pupils to carefully regard the spiritual consequences of right and wrong that were present in every moment. The minute. I have only just a minute, only 60 seconds in it. Forced upon me, can't refuse it. Didn't seek it, didn't choose it, but it's up to me to use it. Give account if I abuse it. Heaven help me if I lose it. Just one tiny little minute. But eternity is in it. The lesson was of the essence of conscience and appealed to moral sensibilities in the education of this young Catholic. Sister ordered the class to write the poem 50 times at home. And the mechanical, this repetitive aspect of a painstakingly handwritten paper was received as severe punishment. I wrote page after page of the minute. But I was just scribbling on a paper. But I was inscribing a spiritual lesson on my own soul. Every moment has a moral calculus. Do the right thing, no matter the consequences, whether or not anyone's looking. It would prove a great teaching with Sister Leona as a constant spiritual guide. Sister Leona's essence left the room, leaving me alone with Mr. Seawright. Upright and elegant, he looked at me expectantly as a master considers a squire. I took a deep breath, surveyed the cash, looked at him directly in the eyes, lowered my head, gently folded the suitcase, locked it, and pushed it back across that divide of time and space in which swirl black holes which swallow souls. Toward the puzzled Mr. Seawright. This is not my department, I said. I referred Mr. Seawright to Republican headquarters, which handled contributions for the PER campaign. I see. He straightened up, his eyes narrowed. Yes, of course, Mr. Kucinich, I'll take this money downtown. He gave me an imperious dead stare as he removed the suitcase from the table. What kind of campaign is this? He asked, incredulous, shaking his head as he lugged the suitcase back to his car. My thought exactly. Mr. Seawright used to run the Numbers, a lucrative underground lottery involving a network of neighborhood stores and taverns, which paid off daily to those lucky gamblers who had correctly guessed a number based on the last 3 digits of each category of advances, declines, and unchanged in the Dow Jones Daily Stock Market Report. On the streets of Cleveland, where I grew up, people brought dream books to discern the winning numbers in their sleep. invoking the science of the subconscious for 10 cents a player. They could decode the wisdom buried deep in their dreams and dutifully play an esoteric number in hopes of climbing out of debt, paying the rent, buying clothes, or having a night out on the town. Well, there was always the possibility of winning free money. The biggest winner was always the person who ran the game. Numbers were illegal, part of Cleveland's tempestuous underground of gambling, payoffs to politicians, police raids of numbers bosses, and street violence for anyone who crossed the turf of the numbers kingpin, who raked in large sums of money each month, totaling in the millions. Street
Yes.
cash in suitcases moving secretly into a mayor's race could tip the balance in a close election, with walking around money given to politicians to help get out the vote. I hope that PERC didn't operate this way. If he won, I'd see for myself. I didn't want to consider that corrupt interest had latched onto my candidate or vice versa. So I continued to concentrate on constructing the PERC platform and organizing the campaign.
Dennis,
I'm going to stop there and let's go to the audience.
All right.
And I can bring in another chapter later, but let's go for it.
Yes, this is Lisa. We have a lot of very interesting questions. Some of them kind of overlap each other, but I would like to start with the first one, and then we'll just follow along as you can, Mr. Kucinich. The questions are many and they're very interesting, so I hope we get to most of them. Number one was, how can activists in a 250,000 person city reduce the damage by neoliberal electeds?
Well, I think, the first thing is, what I know from the book is this. First of all, organization is critical. Secondly, you focus on economic issues. I mean, what I focused on in saving the municipal electric system was the fact that it provided electricity 20% cheaper than the private utility. And so people resonated with that. And also that their bills were going to go up if the public utility were sold to the private company and there was a utility monopoly. So I would say that, this, as you described this, whether it's neoliberal or neoconservative philosophy, we are in an era where there'll be diminishing, notwithstanding the amount of money, the largesse that was pumped into cities across the country over the last year. I can promise you that the privatization of public assets will be at the top of many corporate interests in the next few years. And so one has to be on guard and watch for any activity at a council level in particular to see if there's any proposals out there to sell an electric system or a water system or a sewer system or privatize some municipal service. Because ultimately, the privatization of the municipal services will cause people to pay twice. Once for what they already paid for to set up the service, and a second time at a higher rate, because once things are privatized, wages are cut and the profits go up and people end up paying more. So, it's vigilance, just as eternal vigilance is the price of liberty, so too is our economic freedom and our freedom as citizens in a democracy. And cities are a great place to start. It's where I started. And you just have to pay attention. And if the city's 250,000 or it's 25,000, the principles are the same. You have to keep track of what's happening in your community. And I did. I did it by being involved as a council person and getting increasingly involved. And I came in, as Elizabeth likes me to remind people, when I was elected mayor of Cleveland, I was elected as an independent. I beat both political parties to be able to be elected mayor of Cleveland. So, that's not a small matter here in Ohio. But I think, the economic issues are what I focused on very, very carefully.
That helps so much to have that specific information. We need to take that, your experience and what you've just said to us, and realize that is, an active way to go. We need.
And if I may,
Yes.
Lisa, if I may, for those who are on this call, if you get involved in any kind of a privatization thing, I'd be happy to talk to you. I'll make sure that, if you contact Lisa or Central New Mexico PDA, they can give you my email contact information. So, because I'm always happy to advise civic activists on the steps that can be taken to block any kind of liquidation of public assets. And I'll tell you, to me, privatization at any level is problematic for the public interest. Axiomatic. It is often devastating, and we're going to see more of that because at some point there'll be this contraction of revenue in cities, and when that happens, they're going to start looking at getting rid of public assets. Next
Thank
question.
you so much. And folks on this call, please take advantage of that offer that you've just been given. So that is critical, and it's going to be critical for some time to come, it sounds like. Jim asked that you talk about the Democrats increasing the proposed military budget to $778 billion, $38 billion above Trump's last budget. What can you say to that for us?
Well, look, in the book, there's a chapter in the book where I talk about how at age 25, I ended up becoming a congressional candidate. And I ran to end the war in Vietnam.
Yes.
And I ran against a conservative Republican congressman in a conservative district. I ran an pro-peace campaign. And, I was just one side of being a hippie. I had long hair, and, my appearance was in keeping with the times. And the focus was on the war as a moral issue and also as an economic issue. The first vote I ever cast in Congress was on an appropriations bill. And it was, a perfunctory vote. And some of that money went to fund the Department of Defense. After that vote, for 16 years, I did not vote for a single expenditure for the Pentagon, because I quickly came to an understanding that it was a racket, that war is a racket. And, it's one thing, and I think Democrats who are out there pushing for tax increases make a big mistake when they don't look at the trillions of dollars that we've wasted through the Pentagon and through these wars. And you stop that, and there's plenty of money to go around. And so, it's no surprise that both political parties have been able to keep the Pentagon budget going famously. And, it's all the same thing over and over again. I couldn't stand it, and I never supported it. And, sometimes one of the few people actually voted against it and spoke against that spending. And as many of you know, and with the help of some people on this call, right after 9/11, when they were planning for the war in Iraq, on October 2nd, 2002, I went to the Congress and I presented an analysis of President Bush's call for war and how none of it was proven. They were lying to people. I knew that then. Now some people are saying, "Oh, if I'd only known then what I know now." Baloney. People knew that there was no case for war. So it is a bipartisan problem, and we have to be very careful pretending that the font of all justice, mercy, and righteousness resides in a particular political party. I mean, Progressive Democrats of America know better, but I can tell you that, I know from my own experience that this Pentagon budget is a nightmare, and it will always be. And if you don't start a war, how do you spend the material that they have to keep every year increasing the budget for? Next question.
Yes, many questions about the third party concept. Some people are calling it maybe possibly a people's party. This came from Beth. Others are also talking about, do we need a new party? We have the Green Party, but there are many, many questions about another party and whether that would be, whether we could make it work.
Well, that's a longer discussion.
Yeah.
I will tell you this. I mean, I came within an eyelash of being elected to Congress in 1974 as an independent, because the party didn't support me in 72 when I ran, and I almost won that race. In 74, I went against both parties. I missed finishing in first place by a point and a half. Got elected mayor as an independent. Look, I understand with my history and my involvement, shortcomings in the party system. I know about that, but I don't want to go down a rabbit hole on this discussion. But let me say that I'm quite attuned to the concerns that people have about the inability of the two-party system to deliver for people. When you think about it, we can choose any number of cars, different kinds of shoes, different streaming services. Our politics are so narrow. It's like they don't really respond to who we are at this point. We've evolved beyond just the narrow precepts of a single partisan view of the world. It's just, it's an anachronism when you get right down to it. But, and I discussed some of that in the book, by the way,
Yes.
the division of light and power. And again, for those of you who may have just tuned in, the division of light and power, the centerpiece of the book it's really an allegory on today's politics. But it's also a very detailed explication of a corrupt effort to try to steal a city's municipal electric system with the help of the political establishment, the media, the corporate establishment, and ultimately organized crime, because there were 3 assassination attempts that were made on me and through my efforts to try to save our municipal electric system. One which a high-powered rifle shot came right through this, this area where I'm sitting in my home in Cleveland, Ohio. I mean, this is no joke. When you play in that league and you're taking on these big interests and you're real about it. I'm not talking about, rhetorical, where there's an actual outcome where at this point we're talking 44 years ago, 45 years ago. There was at least $250 to $500 million in assets at stake there in a city of 750,000 people. So do the math. And in a city, by the way, at that point, Cleveland was known as the bombing capital of America. Organized crime was honeycombed into the corporate structure and into the political structure. That's what I took on. But I could not have done it if I followed the path of a party system, which was, part of the problem. Now, does that mean it's still that way now? I don't know. I mean, you draw your own conclusions, but this would be a lovely discussion to have at a later date with, discussions with people all over the country. I want to keep today, as much as I can on the book, but I can refer to the book because these questions that you're asking, I do have that reference. So let's go to the next question.
Yes, all right. This is from Greg saying, and I'm reading this one, do you think we should be strategic, in quotes, about introducing radical proposals, or just go ahead even when the times indicate that we'll be sneered at?
Well, look, I got elected in Cleveland, Ohio. I defeated the Republican to get elected mayor, to get elected to the state Senate. I was one of the only Democrats who got elected in 1994 to the state Senate. One of the only Democrats elected statewide, that year. And when I won in 96 for Congress, the first of 8 terms, I defeated the Republican incumbent who was part of Newt Gingrich's leadership team. Now, how did I do that? I did it by focusing on healthcare, education, jobs, wages, trade policy. I focused on that because the economics are in some ways irreducible issues that relate to people's practical aspirations. And we as progressives have to be really careful not to not to alienate the very people who are looking for our help on the economic issues by, and this is just my opinion, by getting so absorbed in identity politics that people think we don't understand what even deeper concerns they may have. And I speak as someone who was known as a great champion of, LGBTQ rights in the Congress, a champion of civil rights, someone who understands deeply, the issues attendant to abortion. But you know what? It's the economic issues that brought me to Congress. And I see war as an economic as well as a moral issue. So we must be careful about, so that we don't get tuned out. And I think this is kind of happening to the Democratic Party right now. You see, nationally, there's a feeling like party doesn't really get it. And you have to remember that you got to go back almost 25, 30 years when the party decided that the path to power was to take corporate contributions in the same way that the Republicans did. And so you get a book when you get into every Congress, and the book gives you the PACs to call, and there are labor PACs and there's corporate PACs, and there's no differentiation ideologically or anything. It's like, get the money and get reelected. That's all it's about. The dialing for dollars is as important for some members as it is to go on the floor of the House and debate the philosophy or impact of a piece of legislation. I mean, that's the reality. I'm not speaking of someone that, hated my job. I love being in Congress, but I have to tell you, the reality is that today, more than ever, money rules. With Citizens United, hey, it's very difficult to squeeze into the system. Not impossible, but the way we must stay attuned to the practical aspirations of people and don't get sucked into issues that, well, they might be important, and while we may be able to deal with them when we get in, sometimes it's hardly the banner issue that we want to move into a constituency with, particularly in a district that's like a toss-up. And there's more of those out there, and that is within, that's a commentary within the context of the two-party system that we have, by the way. Next question.
Yes, there's a lot of lead into this question, but it does concern privatization. So I'd like to quote it from Pat. It said, it's become obvious and explicit that Biden has quietly decided to carry forward the Trump privatization of U.S. medical care through Medicare and through allowing private capital to buy VA facilities, then allowing them to lease the facilities back to the VA, a classic privatization scam to get the public facility for pennies on the dollar through bankruptcy.
Well, I don't know, but would I be shocked?
Yeah.
Look, post office, always up for grabs. They've been dismantling the post office piece by piece. The VA, absolutely, we have to keep an eye on. The space program. I mean, there's so many different areas where there's such massive public interest. And if the government looks the other way or facilitates privatization, look, it's happening everywhere. Okay. And, where does it lead? It leads to, kind of a corporate groupthink, which inevitably, is profoundly anti-democratic. And, see, if you make the connections around those deeper principles and the economic principles, you can unite people across partisan lines. It's not like wave the banner, vote Democrat. No, vote for better wages, vote for healthcare for all, jobs, fair trade, peace. I mean, all those things. And then somebody will say, "Oh, yeah, I like that. Oh, he's a Democrat. Oh, good. Whatever." But the emphasis on partisan right now creates more polarization, which I think is part of the problem we have today. It's part of the toxicity in our politics, a partisanship nightmare, really. There needs to be like a healing hand on that fevered brow of the body politic. Next question.
Yeah. The right wing, this is from Aline, the right wing is extremely organized and they have a long-term strategy to reshape the country in their image and prevent people from having a vote to prevent that. They have the cohesion and the discipline to stick with that strategy. We tend to be disorganized and less coordinated in our efforts. How do we increase our effectiveness while remaining who we are as progressives, not authoritarians?
Well, part of the problem, paradoxically, is the entrainment with the right-left polarity. You know, one of the reasons I was able to gain support in stopping, at least halting temporarily, certain military actions or creating enough public interest in it to cause people to pay attention was that I would seek out people on the other side of the aisle and some of the most right-wing people in the Congress to see if I could get their interest in some issue that I was working on, particularly for peace. And occasionally I had success. I mean, I by putting together one of the oddest coalitions that Congress has ever seen in 1999, we were able to stop the Clinton administration from continuing the bombing of Serbia. You know, and I did it by being able to walk into Tom DeLay's office, believe it or not. Now, did I change my politics in that moment? Hell no. But was I strategic about it? Yeah, you need to, you know, we have to have strategic alliances, which is why one must be, you know, well, it may be that within the current system, we may sit in the pew with the Democrats. At the same time, I felt an obligation to go back and forth across the aisle and talk to people to build coalitions that maybe hadn't been formed before. And so how do we organize? Well, first of all, we have to ask, you know, what's the most important thing for us? Is it peace? Is it, you know, is it the economy? Is it monetary policy, fairness in the marketplace, trade, all those things? You know, what are we most concerned about? And then not as one issue, but you know, what's the leading edge of our argument, and stay with it. And what I feel is really important is not get pulled into this internet driven invective that creates a dialectic of conflict that isolates people, that keeps them from finding a way to connect with somebody if they happen to be a different party or a different philosophy even. So I try to abjure the that almost ritual of partisan condemnation, which comes from an imperious emptiness in dialogue. I really think that the whole inflection of our politics must be changed, and if we don't, we're just going to be tearing each other to pieces, while the main concerns that we have as Americans are being ignored. You know, and I speak as someone, I mean, I started my career helping to run a congressional campaign in I can't even believe this, like I'm living in a time machine, in 1966. But you've got to, you know, we have to organize, and you keep the organizing around principle, around economic issues, around peace. I mean, that's how I've done it. And you know, except for the Democratic Party, as Herb pointed out in the introduction, look, the party, it was the Democrats who, in Columbus, who chopped up my district. Why? Because, you know, they had another agenda that wasn't anything about the people I represented. So let's go to the next question.
All right. This is from Paul. How can we establish a process of actually implementing plans to meet the various promises and goals for meeting the necessary timelines for implementing renewable energy?
Well, in a way, nature's guiding us, whether, nature's already making the decisions no matter what we do. I mean, really,
For sure.
it's, these things were written about 50 years ago. And, Thomas Berry, in his book called The Great Work, talked about how the great work of our life should be a reconciliation with the natural world. Part of that is a relationship between energy and, moving from sustainable to regenerative energy. And that, it's another subject for another day, but the fact of the matter is that we got to be careful of getting into these kind of hip discussions. Solar, imagine this, one of the things that's happening right now with sustainable energy is that solar fields are being built on farmland. That'll be productive farmland that can be used as a carbon sink instead of destroying it to build solar cells. There's a craziness about our approach towards energy and the environment. And so, what can we do? Well, again, people are on this call from all over the country. We have to be aware of what's going on in our community and ask questions and figure out, how does this contribute to protecting the environment? Out in the Southwest, it's legendary now about the water shortages. There's technologies out there that are trying to help regenerate the soil and use less water and protect the ability of the soil to produce food. I mean, I'm learning about some of those things. There's technologies out there right now where there's a form of green jet fuel. We have to make sure that it doesn't get greenwashed jet fuel. But there is movement happening, and but there's this dynamic tension with the oil industry. They don't want stranded assets. The oil's in the ground. They want to pump it out. On the other hand, they've got this environmental reality where the public is, betwixt and between. There's price of energy is going up, and people are looking for more and more alternatives. And we have to push the search for alternatives, push the search for regenerative energy, and at the same time, look at our own choices in energy consumption. Mm-hmm. That can, it's a matter of our personal integrity. What kind of energy do we use? Are we trying to do our part? So, again, that's a much bigger discussion. And the book, by the way, the whole idea about public power is the idea that people have some control over how the power is produced, how much it costs. One of the themes in the book is that the reason why the Cleveland Electric Illuminating Company wanted to take over our municipal electric system is because they needed the revenue that would come from the city of Cleveland's electric system, at least 25 million a year then, and more, because when they raised the rates, it'd go up to 30 million a year extra. And that would be used to pay off debts that were increasing on nuclear power plants that they were building at the time that were neither used nor useful. I mean, I was right at the beginning of raising this question about why the heck are we building these nuclear power plants? I mean, yeah, you can get into the environmental issues, you can get into the safety issues. I got into all those, but hey, was this trip necessary? And it turns out later on it wasn't. So, $10 billion or more was spent. In the meantime, they needed this little electric system taken over so they could increase their revenue flow. I mean, this is, and by the way, that electric system or that nuclear policy ended up in its progression producing the biggest political scandal in the history of the state of Ohio just a year or so ago, when the predecessor utility of the the successor utility of the Cleveland Electric Illuminating Company wanted the public to give them $1 billion bailout of their nuclear power plants. I mean, it's the kind of craziness that goes on. And I saw it all. Protect your municipal assets, because you never know how they will help protect people economically and also protect the democracy, as Tom Johnson said. Next question.
This should be a little fun for this one. Thank you for that explanation. It helps, and I think it shows us that we need to get this book, get into it, and see from so many aspects of your experience what you are telling us tonight. And then you've offered us the opportunity, if we're serious, to come back to you for help. This should be a little bit of fun. This is from Daniel. What was your favorite moment when writing this book? How did you write the book? Why did you write the book? What was your favorite moment during your career in politics? Which office did you feel was the best one? And finally, what office do you feel your perspective was best used? There's a lot in that, but it should be fun to share some of that with us.
Okay, well, one of the things when I was writing the book, my wife helped to edit it. In the period that I had left Congress, I still have access to the House gym and the floor of the House as a former member. So we go to the House gym evenings and weekends. And Elizabeth I'd read the book out loud to Elizabeth, and she would edit it as she's swimming in the House pool. I'm not kidding. I mean, this is really, my most favorite moment of all was when I finished it.
Oh, sure.
I mean, I after 40 years and more, and my most favorite moment was when I wrote the dedication to the book, because that was the last thing I wrote. And the dedication said, "This is for my wife, Elizabeth. I dedicate this book and all the years that went into writing it, every effort poured into making it come alive, every life experience reflected in it, to you, to your heart, and your soul, and your great spirit. To us, dearest darling, to you, wife, life, my all, Dennis, greatest love on Valentine's Day, 2021. That was the moment when I said, yes, I'm done. And now, look, I have been so fortunate throughout a political career where, I've had, to me, it's an honor just to be able to stand up and speak out and to find out what's going on and be able to call what was happening and describe what was happening. I remember during the, I think it was the 2008 presidential debate at Soldiers Field. I felt such a level of energy there that it was so extraordinary. I was talking to an audience from Chicago and, a lot of labor people and political types. And, and I was on and I felt it. And, there's something about when you're connecting with people in a deep way. So, look, Daniel, every, in a life in public service, which, extends now, time machine again, 55 years. There's
Hard to believe.
Every moment to me has been important, but I thought I'd share some of those moments with you. So, hopefully in some way I answered part of your question.
That was nice to hear. That was very nice to hear. A question from Beth. What are your thoughts on how to develop and elect real people's candidates to get the huge majorities to get the people's work done?
Well, you do it district by district. And you have to see the people who resonate with you. I mean, there is this thing about, instantly whether somebody is worth spending your time, your energy, your life on behalf of somebody. And then it's staying involved. Can't just let somebody get elected and then just leave them off on their own, because let me tell you, once somebody goes to Washington, if they're unattended by their constituency, entering the halls of Congress is somewhat like someone who would pass under the lintel of the that was written about in the rhyme of the ancient mariner with the inscription, "Abandon all hope, ye who enter within." That hope and vigilance go together, and you have to stay in touch with people who are in office, and they have to stay in touch with you, because it's only that reciprocal communication between the elected and the electors that make the system work. And really, you have to kind of demand that people get in touch. And look, with this medium today, you know, here we are. I'm in Cleveland and you are all over the country, and we can have a chat about what's going on in the country, about a book. It's not expecting too much anymore for a representative to have, you know, the kind of connection that we have on this call right now, and try to get some answers. And you know, and also in some cases, particularly when somebody's new, advise them of the direction they might want to take. Because I'll tell you, once you get to Congress, if you come into Congress without a political background, you're already in trouble. But if you come there with a political background, then you got to make sure that the accountability thing isn't just up to you, it's up to the people who elected you. Cannot let somebody just go to Washington and just, oh, okay, see you in a couple of years. No, that's a mistake. It's about, you know, it's about more than scorecards. It's about constant communication. Next question.
This is a real strength with Progressive Democrats of America in keeping in touch with our elected officials. We're in their offices. We are asking questions. We are doing it locally. We're sending that information to DC so that folks, our group in DC, are going to the offices there and following up on what we're doing locally. It is a joy to be a part of this organization.
And that's what works. Now, you know, behind me, this slide behind me, by the way, it says. Power to the people, Muni Light. That was our electric system. That's what it was called, Muni Light. And my name was under it at that point as the mayor. And, you know, it really is about empowering people. Because, you know, when we speak of, and Lincoln spoke in the Gettysburg Address, of government of the people, I think there is such a thing. And we can't be so cynical and despairing of the system, which, you know, has a lot of reasons for concern, that we just say, ah, to hell with it, you know. You can never give up, never.
That's good to hear. That helps us when we get very discouraged, I'm sure. We're going to run out of time before we run out of questions, but this is a different take here from Greg. How can we counteract the immense political advantage of the mass media, which are, of course, mouthpieces of the wealthy elites?
Yeah, well, look, in this book, The Division of Light and Power, the media is a central player in supporting a corporate agenda of stealing the city of Cleveland's municipal electric system and delivering it right to the clutches of this utility monopoly. The corruption of the media is cited chapter and verse in this book, and it's worth reading, if only for following the role of the media in a major, in an historic municipal conflict. Today, when we understand, particularly with the electronic media, how far away we got from the 1934 Federal Communications Commission Act, where you know, it was supposed to create electronic media to serve, and these are direct words from the act, in the public interest, convenience, and necessity. We are so far away from that. The monopolization started in 1970 with the failing Newspaper Act, which gave newspapers the ability to conglomerate and to have own broadcasting outlets. And now fewer outlets, more of a corporate worldview. Even local coverage is getting annihilated in that. There's fewer dailies. There's limited coverage of what's going on in cities. Now, how do you deal with that? Well, these little devices give us the ability to communicate. We're communicating now. There is another way to get a message through. The so-called mass communication doesn't have the same large mass subscription that it used to. You know, there's so many different choices that people have. You know, a lot of them are entertainment. People prefer to just duck out and check out rather than be confronted with these daily issues, which can be pretty tough, frankly, and tiring and sometimes obnoxious. But if you believe in something, you try to stay with it. So we open up our own communication. I mean, that's what we do. It's even tougher in this age of COVID because people are in even more isolation. And that's why we use these vehicles like we have right now. And talking to one another, it's so critical. And it's a way to to get together. I mean, you think this is miraculous. I mean, you think of in the last year, how many of us have used this medium to communicate with friends, loved ones, do business, whatever. Well, this is what we do now. And we need to get more and more people, you know, in through this. We also need to make this medium more accessible to people at the lowest income levels, because they're often deprived of it, and we end up with this digital divide, which is devastating. So, you know, I mean, again, you know, we only need a little bit of creativity on this. How are we doing on time, by the way?
We're just, I've looked at further questions, and I think all of them can be answered by folks getting this book, getting a hold of the Division of Light and Power,
Okay.
because I'm sure you're going to find answers in there.
Lisa, you want to do one final question, and then we'll.
Yes, that would be good. It's not a question. I hope you'll get a chance to read the chats, because some of them are delightful in talking about how they've met you, when they came to your understanding of things and decided to vote for you, join you, whatever. This is a great one. This is I'm trying to see, I don't see who it's from. From Lyndall. It says, and Charlie S., my favorite memory of Dennis. When I was working in downtown Houston in 2003, I heard about a presidential candidate who was holding a vegan barbecue in downtown Houston. I said, I have to see this. And instantly I fell in love with Kucinich and his entourage. I followed him to national in 2004 and in 2008. And yes, the vegan barbecue is delicious. So you've got people with all kinds of memories of touching base with you personally, or just in whatever way they could grab hold of you.
Well, let me share a story as we start to bring this, and thank you for telling me that. You know, I became a vegan in 1995, years after I left City Hall, and I was in the state Senate and before I came to Congress. You know, people, you know, we're talking, you know, 26 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
People didn't know what the heck a vegan was. Very few. There were some, but not a lot. And in Congress, it wasn't well known. So I went to one of the first events that I was at as a member of Congress, to my friend in Houston, was a steer roast sponsored by the Texas delegation. So I walk into the room. I won't mention the member of Congress, but I remember this. I walk into the room and I'm looking at this one slab of meat piled on top of another. And I'm looking, I can't eat this. And finally I come to a tray where one slab of meat's piled on top of another, but there's a garnish that is lettuce and celery and carrots. So I start eating that. One of the members comes up to me, the Texas delegation, says, "Come on, have some meat here, Dennis. You know, it's a Texas fine beef." I says, "Hey, you know, I don't eat meat. I'm a vegan." He looked at me, half serious. He says, "What are you, one of them there communists?" So,
oh boy,
yeah, the experience of a vegan in Washington and on the national campaign trail is the subject of a book itself that I actually have started working on, but I don't know if I'll ever have time to finish it. So let me just tell you this. I want to thank each. First of all, Herb, thank you for setting this up.
Thank you, Herb. Yes.
And the book is the Division of Light and Power. You can get it on finney-avenue-books.com, FINNEY avenue-books.com, and it'll give you various choices that you can get it. Some people have asked me to sign it. I have on occasion. Somebody sent me a book. I signed it and sent it back to them. I can do that. But I really appreciate this chance to get together. It's really, you know, it's terrific, and I'm as grateful. I'm very grateful for this chance to talk with you, and thanks to the PDA. You know, when I thought about that 2000, it was the Boston. I think it was the Boston. Was it the Boston convention, Herb?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. When I think about that Boston convention and how we all came together, it was amazing. You know, and you've taken that energy and you've spread it across the country. So that's great. It's fantastic. And I thank you for doing that. And I'm so proud to have played some small part in bringing everybody together. And I'm open to further discussion about any of the other things you want to talk about. I don't want to bore anybody, but you know, your work is critical, all of you. So Alan and Mike, Herb, Lisa, and
Karen
everybody,
and, oh, so many.
Karen,
And
her husband,
Bud,
and,
yes.
you know, everybody on this call. Thanks for participating. And if, you know, there's any privatization issues that are percolating after you read the book, you'll know I can be very helpful on those things. Thank you, and hope all of you have a good holiday season, and one that's blessed for you and your family. So,
Oh, thank you. Alan, would you like to jump in on this? And
Oh, I just want to thank you, Dennis, and I just look
Yes.
forward to doing these with you in the coming months, years, and for a long time, Dennis. Just, you bring so much wisdom to this and insight on everything going on in the world. So thank you so much. It's been really brilliant.
hey, it's great to see you, Alan, and thanks for what you've done and, you know, moving things forward with, you know, Tim, and, you know, we all remember Tim and Steve, and, you know, those who have been so involved with us, and Lila and that whole group of people who's those giants upon whose shoulders we stand. So thanks to each and every one of you for participating, and let's keep the discussion going. Thank you.
Herb,
you.
thank you so much for your friendship between the two of you that brought us this opportunity. We can't thank you enough, Herb. We really can't thank you enough, buddy.
My pleasure, my delight.
Oh, yes, indeed. Karen, can you finish this up? I'm at a loss of words right now.
Sure. Thank you, everyone, for coming this evening for our community gathering for PDA CNM. Thank you, Dennis, for spending time with us. We're so grateful, and we're all looking forward to reading your book. Let's drop that in the chat one more time, our book support. And Herb, thank you for bringing us Dennis. That's fantastic. Lisa and all the other planning team members of PDA CNM. We're here the second Wednesday. You can sign up on the PDA CNM website. You can sign up on the PDA national website. And let's keep this rolling. Let's keep the energy going. Voting, protesting, out on the streets, in the voting polls, doing our organizing. Thank you, everyone, very much. Yes.
Thank you.
If you want to unmute and say goodnight, you can do that.
Yes.
Good night from
Good
you.
night.
Good night. Thanks,
Thank
Herb.
you so much.
Good night.
Dennis.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Night.
Buy the book.
Night.
Buy the book.
Thank you.